Right now, while you're watching this video, someone in your life has already used one of these techniques on you, and you didn't even notice. Manipulation rarely looks the way movies show it. Nobody rubs their hands together and delivers a sinister speech. Real psychological pressure is much quieter. It hides inside an ordinary conversation over breakfast, in a text message from a coworker, in a phone call from a relative that starts with concern and ends with guilt. That's exactly why so many people go through years of their lives under someone else's influence without ever realizing it. They blame their own exhaustion, their mood, their oversensitivity, when in reality there's simply a person nearby who knows how to use psychological leverage for their own benefit. Today we're going to break down 7 specific signs that you're being manipulated in everyday life. This isn't abstract textbook theory. These are real situations that show up in families, at work, in friendships, and even in relationships with the people closest to you. We'll break down each sign, piece by piece, show you how it actually sounds in a real conversation, and most importantly, explain what to do so you stop falling for it. Stay until the end, because the 7th sign is the most common one, and almost nobody catches it in time. This sign is called invalidating feelings, and it's probably the most widespread tool in a manipulator's arsenal. It works in an almost embarrassingly simple way. You share something that hurt or upset you, and in response you hear something like "you're overreacting" or "come on," that's not even worth being upset about. At first glance, it seems like the person is just trying to calm you down or bring some rational perspective. In reality, something very different is happening. Your emotional state gets labeled as disproportionate to reality itself, and you start doubting not the fairness of the situation, but your own sanity. This works especially well when the invalidation repeats over and over in different situations. A person gradually stops trusting their own feelings, starts apologizing for feeling anything at all, and eventually just stops sharing what's going on inside because they already know how the other person will respond. This is a classic soft form of gaslighting, where there's no direct lie, but the reality of your inner experience is quietly and consistently called into question. Notice the difference between support and invalidation. Support sounds something like, "I understand why that upset you, let's figure it out together." Invalidation always carries a hidden message that your reaction is excessive or inappropriate. If after talking to a specific person, you regularly feel like you were wrong simply for being upset, that's a strong sign worth paying closer attention to. This sign is quieter than it looks, but it works even harder than it seems, and it's called using guilt as leverage. This technique runs on a simple formula. The manipulator reminds you of everything they've done for you, of their sacrifices, of the time and energy they've spent, and they do it exactly when they need a specific behavior from you. The manipulator reminds you of everything they've done for you, of their sacrifices, of the time and energy they've spent, and they do it exactly when they need a specific behavior from you. The phrase "I've done so much for you, and this is how you treat me" is a classic example. But there are subtler versions too, like a heavy sigh, hurt silence, or hints at their own suffering instead of a direct request. This pattern shows up especially often in family relationships. A parent might tell their now grown child that their health isn't what it used to be, and it wouldn't hurt to call more often. A partner might bring up how many years they put up with inconvenience for the sake of the relationship. A friend might recall an old favor exactly when you decline to help them now. The core of this manipulation is that you make a decision not because you genuinely want to, but because the guilt becomes unbearable, and it's easier to make it go away by saying yes. Genuine gratitude never demands immediate repayment and never shows up as an argument in a disagreement. Guilt-based manipulation almost always appears right when you need to make a decision, and it functions as a pressure tool rather than a sincere expression of feeling. If you notice you're agreeing to something not out of desire, but out of fear of feeling like a bad person, it's worth pausing and being honest with yourself about that. This sign is what psychologists call emotional whiplash, and it involves constant switching between praise and criticism from the same person. First, you're praised, called the best specialist, the most caring partner, the perfect friend, and then just a day later, sometimes even an hour later, you're criticized for the very same quality that was just praised. This unpredictability isn't accidental. It keeps a person in a constant state of tension and constant anticipation of approval, because there's never any way to know in advance which reaction will show up this time. The mechanism here is built on a basic human need for stability and predictability. When the people around you swing wildly in their opinion of you without any clear logic, the brain starts searching for a pattern and involuntarily fixates on earning praise while avoiding criticism. Gradually, a person starts adjusting their behavior to match the manipulator's mood, trying to guess what will be seen as acceptable today and what will trigger disapproval. This wears a person down emotionally even more than steady criticism would, because the hope for approval never fully disappears. This dynamic often shows up between a manager and an employee, where the employee is called irreplaceable one moment and publicly humiliated over a small mistake the next. A similar pattern appears in romantic relationships too, when a partner showers someone with compliments one day and turns cold and distant the next, with no clear reason. Healthy feedback is based on specific facts and doesn't depend on the speaker's mood. If the way your character is evaluated keeps swinging chaotically for no explainable reason, that's a sign you're being controlled through instability rather than honest conversation. This sign doesn't look like pressure at all in the usual sense, because it's built not on words, but on their absence. This is about ignoring and silence used as a control tool, something psychologists often call the silent treatment. A person suddenly stops responding to messages, gives short one-word answers, dramatically turns away, or leaves the room after a disagreement without explaining why and without giving the other person a chance to talk it through. At first glance, this might look like someone simply needing space to cool off, and in healthy relationships, that kind of pause genuinely exists. The difference is that manipulative silence isn't meant to help anyone calm down. Its real goal is to make the other person feel anxious, guilty, and desperate to restore contact at any cost. While one person stays silent, the other starts running through every possible reason in their head, apologizing for things they may not have even done, and eventually makes the first move toward reconciliation just to end the unbearable tension. This kind of behavior falls under passive aggression, because there's no open conflict on the surface, yet the pressure is still very much felt. The manipulator gets exactly what they want without voicing a single accusation, simply by withdrawing from communication just enough to trigger anxiety in the other person. A healthy pause always comes with an explanation, something like needing a bit of alone time before talking things through later. Manipulative silence, on the other hand, is never explained, and that very uncertainty is what makes it such an effective pressure tool. This sign is called the false choice, and this technique is especially clever because it creates the illusion of freedom for the person being manipulated. The trick works by offering you a choice between two options, when in reality both options only benefit the manipulator, while the actual third option, the one that would genuinely work for you, is left out of the conversation entirely. For example, a coworker might ask whether you'll take on an extra task tonight or over the weekend, when the honest answer is that the task isn't even part of your job in the first place. A similar pattern shows up often in relationships when a partner asks whether you'll visit their family on Saturday or Sunday, completely ignoring the possibility that you might already have other plans for the weekend. The trap works precisely because the brain locks onto choosing between the presented options and stops noticing that the choice itself was artificially imposed. The person ends up feeling like they made their own decision, when really they just picked between two options from someone else's script. Pause before answering and ask yourself whether these two options are actually the only ones that exist. A useful habit is to say the third option out loud, even if the manipulator never offered it. A phrase like, "Actually, I'm not available either day," immediately hands control of the situation back to you and dismantles the whole structure of the imposed choice. This sign is built on constant comparisons to other people, and its goal is a slow, methodical erosion of self-esteem. The manipulator regularly points out that someone else is doing better, earning more, looking better, or behaving more appropriately. Phrases like, "My friend's husband always helps around the house," or "Your coworker already got promoted, and you're still stuck in the same spot," sound like harmless remarks, but they build a lasting sense of not being enough. What makes this technique tricky is that the comparison is almost never fair or complete. Usually, one convenient detail from someone else's life is pulled out of context and set against your entire current situation. The person doing the comparing rarely mentions the struggles or flaws behind that so-called role model. Because the point was never a fair assessment, it was creating the feeling that you're constantly losing some unspoken competition. Over time, this creates chronic anxiety and an ongoing need to prove your own worth, often at the expense of your actual needs and boundaries. The comparison almost always shows up right when you're already feeling vulnerable, and it's almost never paired with a concrete suggestion for how to actually improve things. Healthy feedback, by contrast, always comes with practical advice, not just a reminder that someone else is doing better. This sign shows up more often than almost any of the others, and it involves urgency pressure, where a manipulator artificially speeds up a decision, robbing the other person of time to think clearly. Phrases like, "I need an answer right now," or "if you don't decide today, it'll be too late," sound convincing and create the illusion of real necessity, when in most cases, that urgency was manufactured for one single purpose: to stop you from weighing the situation with a clear head. The mechanism here runs on basic human psychology. When there's no time left to think, the brain switches into a fast reaction mode and starts leaning on emotion instead of logic. In that state, a person is far more likely to agree to unfavorable terms, just to relieve the tension of uncertainty. That's exactly why this technique shows up so often in sales, in money negotiations, and in personal relationships, when a partner demands an immediate answer on something important, knowing full well that with more time to think, the answer would be different. Ask yourself one simple question: what would actually happen if I took even a short pause before answering? In the vast majority of everyday situations, the honest answer is that nothing catastrophic would happen. Healthy interactions always leave room for reflection, while manipulative pressure always tries to strip that room away. We've gone through 7 signs of hidden manipulation, and if 2 or 3 of them sounded familiar, that's a completely normal reaction, because these techniques show up in almost every environment, whether that's family, work, or friendships. Here's the quick checklist. Notice moments when your feelings get labeled as exaggerated or inappropriate for no real reason. Watch for guilt being used to pull consent out of you through reminders of past favors and sacrifices. Pay attention to sharp swings between praise and criticism from the same person with no clear logic behind them. Learn to tell a healthy pause apart from silence used as punishment. Get better at spotting a false choice and offering a third option nobody asked you for. Notice constant comparisons that show up right when you're feeling vulnerable. Never make important decisions under artificial urgency. Always give yourself the right to pause. Understanding these 7 mechanisms won't turn you into someone who suspects manipulation in every conversation, but it will absolutely help you trust your own instincts and notice sooner when your boundaries are being crossed. Building emotional intelligence starts with exactly this skill: telling healthy interaction apart from hidden pressure. If this video was helpful, subscribe to the channel, because there's a lot more practical psychology ahead to help you understand yourself and the people around you better.